The early morning sun rose slowly over the small desert town of Red Mesa, painting everything in warm gold. The wooden buildings glowed softly, and long shadows stretched across the dusty ground. The town was waking up. Shop doors creaked open, horses snorted as they were led out of stables, and people began their usual routines. In the middle of this peaceful morning walked a cowboy named Ethan Cole, a tall man with calm eyes and a quiet way of moving. Ethan was known in Red Mesa for minding his own business. He rarely spoke, unless someone spoke to him first, and even then, he was brief and polite. He had wandered into town only 3 days earlier, planning to rest before moving on. He wasn't the kind of man who liked staying in one place too long. He preferred wide-open land and silence. Still, there was something about Red Mesa that made him slow down a little. Maybe it was the friendliness of the townspeople, or the clean desert air, or simply the need for a break after months on the trail. This morning, Ethan walked toward the market area, hoping to buy breakfast. He wasn't in a hurry, and he enjoyed the peaceful sounds of the early day. As he reached the heart of town, he noticed a small crowd gathered near a wooden platform. He heard a man calling out loudly, trying to get people's attention. Ethan's steps slowed. He wasn't someone who enjoyed crowds, but something about the tone of the seller's voice made him curious. It sounded too excited, almost exaggerated, like someone trying to make a big show to impress people. He decided to move a little closer, not to join the crowd, but simply to understand what was happening. Ethan liked to know the things going on around him. It was a habit that helped him stay out of trouble. The platform stood beside a booth decorated with colorful fabrics and handmade crafts. The seller, a cheerful man in a bright vest, was waving his hands as if trying to guide everyone's attention to the items laid out before him. Ethan noticed that among the blankets and pottery stood 2 young Apache women. They looked calm but cautious, standing slightly apart from the busy seller's display. Ethan immediately understood this wasn't anything wrong or harmful. These women were clearly not being mistreated. They stood proudly, wearing traditional clothing with beautiful patterns. Their expressions were alert, and they didn't appear frightened or pressured. The seller spoke to the crowd, explaining that the 2 women were skilled artisans who were visiting town to sell their handmade work. He was helping them by calling attention to their craft. The seller laughed in a lively way as he shouted, "Buy one, get one free. That's what I'm saying about these baskets. Not about the people, folks. Just the baskets." He held up 2 beautifully woven baskets, shaking them for everyone to see. The crowd laughed lightly at his exaggerated style, understanding the joke. The 2 Apache women exchanged a small smile with each other, clearly used to the seller's dramatic personality. One of them looked around slowly, her dark eyes scanning the crowd, observing people with quiet intelligence. The other held a small bundle of woven items, arranging them neatly on a table. Ethan relaxed a little. He had seen enough places where misunderstandings turned into problems, but this wasn't one of them. Still, something about the situation kept him standing there instead of walking away. Perhaps it was the calm confidence of the 2 women, or maybe it was the seller's silly attempt to attract customers. Or maybe Ethan just felt curious, something he didn't often allow himself to feel. He stepped closer, allowing himself a better look. The baskets were well made, their patterns sharp and intricate. The blankets displayed behind them had colors that reminded him of sunsets: deep red, warm orange, soft tan. He had always admired skilled craftsmanship, even if he never said it out loud. The seller noticed Ethan's approach and immediately turned his lively energy in his direction. "Ah, a cowboy with a good eye," he said loudly. "Come take a look. These are the finest works you'll see in the entire region." Ethan didn't respond right away. He glanced at the women instead, showing a silent respect. One of them nodded politely. The other kept her eyes on the items as she continued arranging them, but he could tell she was aware of him. The seller continued talking, saying, "These 2 sisters traveled here with their family's best work. Everything on this table is handmade, and has meaning. Each pattern tells a story. Ethan looked at the baskets again. He could see the care in every detail. He didn't know much about weaving, but he knew good quality when he saw it. He wanted to ask which one the sisters had made, but he didn't know how to start the conversation. He wasn't used to speaking much, especially not with strangers. Before he could decide, the crowd began to grow larger. More people approached, attracted by the seller's loud voice. Ethan stepped back a little, so he wouldn't block anyone. He preferred space around him, and crowds weren't his comfort zone. One of the sisters, the older one, judging by her calm expression, stepped slightly forward and spoke to the people in a clear but gentle voice. "These baskets are made from willow. We gather the materials ourselves. It takes many days to create each pattern." Her voice carried a natural steadiness that immediately commanded respect. The younger sister lifted a blanket, showing the woven designs. "And these blankets tell stories from our home," she added. "Each symbol has a meaning." The people around them murmured with interest. Some leaned in to look more closely. Others asked questions about the designs. The sisters answered patiently, explaining the meaning behind each pattern. Their words were simple, honest, and peaceful. Ethan watched quietly. He respected how they spoke, not trying to impress anyone, just sharing their skill with sincerity. That kind of confidence was rare, and he admired it. Suddenly, he noticed something that made him shift his attention. A few men in the back of the crowd seemed to be pushing and talking loudly among themselves, not in a harmful way, but in a careless one. They were joking too loudly, bumping into each other, and one of them nearly knocked into the table holding the crafts. The younger sister quickly steadied a basket that almost tipped over. Her movements were calm, but Ethan noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. She didn't like chaos around their work. Before the table could be disturbed again, Ethan stepped closer and positioned himself quietly at the front of the crowd. He didn't give any commands or speak loudly. He simply stood there with a calm presence that somehow created more space around the table. People unconsciously noticed him and adjusted their positions. The sisters looked at him briefly. They didn't smile, but there was a flicker of appreciation in their eyes. They could tell he was giving them respectful space without making a show of it. The seller saw this too and lowered his voice slightly, saying, "Looks like we've got someone who understands respect." Ethan didn't respond. He wasn't doing it for praise. He just didn't like seeing craftsmanship treated carelessly. The younger sister gently placed the last blanket on the table, arranging it neatly. The older sister spoke softly, saying, "Thank you," but only loud enough for Ethan to hear. He nodded once. For a moment, the noise of the crowd faded from Ethan's awareness. All he saw were the two women standing with pride behind their work and the simple beauty of their craft. He didn't know why, but he felt a quiet pull inside him, something telling him that this day might lead to something unexpected. And Ethan Cole, a man who usually avoided surprises, didn't walk away. Ethan stayed near the booth longer than he planned. He kept thinking he would walk away after a minute, yet something held him there. Maybe it was the peaceful energy the two sisters carried. Or maybe it was the way the morning sun seemed to highlight their handcrafted items, making the colors brighter and richer. Whatever the reason, Ethan found himself standing quietly as the crowd slowly shifted and changed. After a while, the first wave of curious townspeople moved on, giving the booth more breathing room. The seller wiped his forehead dramatically, acting as if he had worked harder than anyone else in town. "Whew, that was something," he said cheerfully. "When this crowd starts moving, even the ground gets tired." The sisters didn't laugh openly, but the younger one's eyes softened with amusement. Ethan noticed the small reactions, though he pretended not to be watching closely. He didn't want to seem like he was staring. Instead, he stepped back enough to let new customers come forward. A mother with her young son approached the blankets, admiring one with a bright red border. "This one is beautiful," she said. "What is the meaning of this pattern. The older sister answered gently, "It represents the path of courage. It reminds people to stay strong and calm during troubled times." The woman smiled softly, and her son traced the woven lines with his finger. The moment was simple, yet warm, and Ethan found himself appreciating how peaceful everything felt. Still, Ethan was observant by nature, and he noticed the younger sister kept glancing toward the marketplace path every few minutes. It wasn't fear, more like expectation, like she was waiting for someone who hadn't arrived yet. Her eyes were alert, but calm, searching for a familiar face. Finally, Ethan spoke, though only after hesitating. He stepped a little closer and directed his question to the older sister, since she had spoken the most. "You two expectin' someone?" His voice was quiet and respectful, as always. The older sister looked at him with calm eyes. She didn't seem surprised he had noticed. "He traveled with us, but had something important to do this morning. He said he would join us soon." Ethan nodded slightly. He wasn't trying to pry, just to understand the situation. Town gets busy. Easy to get delayed. "Yes," she agreed. "But he is responsible. He will come." The younger sister arranged a set of small woven charms on the table. They were shaped like circles, stars, and tiny animals. She looked up at Ethan briefly, but didn't speak. Instead, she focused on making sure everything was placed neatly. Ethan remained nearby, not because he wanted to involve himself, but because something felt unfinished. He sensed a slight tension in the air, gentle, not alarming, yet noticeable. Maybe the sisters seemed calm, but they were clearly waiting for their brother for a reason. The seller clapped his hands once, breaking the quiet moment. "All right, folks, we got fresh buyers coming in. Let's show them the best of Red Mesa." His enthusiastic voice attracted another small group. The sisters once again answered questions, lifted baskets for people to examine, and explained stories behind their craft. Ethan stepped away so customers could stand closer. But he didn't leave the area. As he moved a few feet to the side, he noticed something interesting. Even from a distance, the sisters kept glancing at him. It wasn't nervousness. It was more like gratitude because he had created a small sense of order in the crowd earlier. And even now, his calm presence helped maintain a respectful space. Ethan didn't smile, but he felt a quiet warmth. He wasn't used to people acknowledging his presence. Most folks barely noticed him because he spoke so little. Yet these women seemed aware of him in a way that felt gentle and natural. Time passed slowly, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The heat increased, and the seller borrowed a small towel to wipe his face again. "If this sun gets any brighter, it'll start charging us rent," he joked, earning a few chuckles from passers-by. The younger sister lifted a jug of water from behind the table and offered some to her older sister. Ethan noticed she didn't drink any herself until her sister had taken a sip first. It wasn't fear, it was respect. Ethan admired that. After another hour, customers thinned out. The market was busiest in the morning, and now, people were wandering toward the food stalls for lunch. The sisters took a short break, sitting on a small bench behind their booth. Ethan felt it might be a good time to step away. He didn't want to seem like he was lingering without reason. He lifted his hat politely. The older sister nodded. "Thank you for your kindness earlier." He returned the nod, then turned to leave but only took 3 steps before stopping. He heard hurried footsteps approaching from behind him. When he turned slightly, he saw a young Apache man jogging toward the booth, carrying a small pack on his back. The younger sister stood up immediately when she saw him. Her relief was clear, though she tried to hide it behind a calm expression. "Talon," she said softly, as he reached them. Their brother, Talon, breathed a little heavily but smiled. "I'm here. Sorry for being late. I had to collect something important." The older sister stood too. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Talon said. "Everything is fine." Ethan observed from a respectful distance. Talon looked just as calm and steady as his sisters, though he had a spark of energy in his eyes. After a moment, Talon noticed Ethan nearby and gave him a friendly nod of acknowledgement. Ethan nodded back. The seller seemed relieved, too. "Good timing, my friend. I was about to send a search party for you," he said dramatically. Talon chuckled. "I had something to take care of, but I'm here now." Ethan didn't know why, but he felt a soft sense of ease, knowing the siblings were reunited. Something about their bond seemed strong and genuine. Before he could walk away again, Talon approached him. "You stood near the booth earlier," he said. "Thank you. My sisters told me you kept things calm." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Just stood there. Didn't do much." "Sometimes standing is enough," Talon replied with quiet wisdom. Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded again. The younger sister approached then, holding a small woven charm shaped like a sun. She extended it toward Ethan with both hands, a polite gesture. "A small thank you," she said softly. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to receiving gifts. "I didn't do anything for a reward." "It is not a reward," she said. "It is a gesture of respect." The charm was simple yet beautiful. Its pattern was tight, balanced, and clearly made with care. Ethan accepted it slowly, closing his fingers around it. "Thank you," he said quietly. The younger sister gave a small nod, then stepped back. At that moment, the seller loudly announced, "All right, everyone, with our full team present, we're ready for the next round of customers." He lifted 2 baskets into the air, as if presenting treasures. Talon sighed with amusement, shaking his head. "He likes to make everything a show," he whispered to Ethan. "I gathered that," Ethan replied. Talon grinned. Ethan took a few steps backward, preparing to leave for real this time. The day was getting warmer, and he needed to find food and shade. But just as he turned to walk away fully, he overheard Talon speaking softly to his sisters. "Before evening, we must visit the north side of town. We should not forget why we came here." The words were quiet, but carried a hint of purpose. Ethan kept walking, yet his mind caught on that sentence. He couldn't explain it, but something told him this wasn't the end of their paths crossing. Not yet. The afternoon in Red Mesa moved slowly, as if the heat made time stretch longer than usual. Ethan walked through the town with an easy pace, the woven sun charm still in his hand. He felt the smooth pattern with his thumb, noticing how carefully it had been made. He hadn't expected to receive anything from the sisters, and the small gift felt strangely important to him. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, making sure it wouldn't fall out. Ethan planned to get lunch at the small cafe near the edge of town. It was a quiet place, and he liked the calm atmosphere. But as he walked, he kept thinking about the words Talon had spoken earlier. "We should not forget why we came here." The sentence had been soft, but it carried weight, like there was something important the siblings needed to do. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who involved himself in other people's business. But curiosity tugged at him now. Gentle, yet steady. He wondered what purpose had brought the siblings to Red Mesa besides selling their handmade crafts. He had grown up learning to pay attention to small details, and he sensed something more beneath the surface. When he reached the cafe, he took a seat near the window so he could look out at the street. He ordered a simple meal: bread, fruit, and tea. As he ate, he watched people walk by, their shadows stretching long in the bright sun. The town felt peaceful, but the marketplace area stayed lively, with sellers calling out to customers and people chatting cheerfully. Ethan tried to focus on his food, but his thoughts returned again and again to the siblings. He wasn't worried for them. Nothing seemed wrong. It was more the feeling that their story had more chapters unfolding, and somehow, without planning it, he was already part of it. After finishing his meal, Ethan sat for a while longer, thinking quietly. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do next. Normally, he would explore the town, maybe check the stables, or find a shady spot to rest. But today felt different. Something inside him nudged him toward the marketplace again. Finally, he stood up, paid for his food, and stepped back outside. The sun was softer now, settling into the late afternoon. A warm breeze brushed the town, carrying with it a faint scent of wild herbs from the desert. Ethan walked slowly, letting the rhythm of the street guide him. He didn't rush, but he didn't wander aimlessly either. His steps had purpose, even if he hadn't spoken it out loud. When he reached the marketplace again, the crowd had thinned. The busiest hour had passed, and only a few people remained near the booth, where the siblings were selling their crafts. Ethan saw the bright vest of the seller first. He was still as enthusiastic as ever, though his voice was a little tired now. Talon stood beside him, smiling politely, as the seller explained a basket pattern to a curious couple. The sisters were seated behind the table, taking a short rest. They noticed Ethan approach and gave small nods of recognition. He nodded back, keeping a respectful distance, not wanting to interrupt their work. As he watched from a few steps away, the seller finished with his customers and turned toward Talon. "When the sun starts to drop, we'll need to pack everything up," he said. "Evening winds can be strong." Talon nodded. "Yes, we plan to leave before dusk." The older sister stood then and said softly, "We still need to visit the north side of town." "Tell." The younger sister added, "We should go soon." "Soon. Since." The seller looked curious but didn't ask questions. He wasn't the type to push into people's private matters. Ethan noticed the siblings preparing a few items, placing them into woven bags. The movement was calm but purposeful. After a few minutes, the older sister approached Ethan quietly. "You are walking through town?" she asked. Ethan's eyes met hers. He nodded once. "Just looking around." She hesitated, then said, "We are going to the north side. It is a short walk. If your path leads that way too, you may walk nearby." Ethan understood the subtle meaning. She wasn't asking for help directly, nor suggesting anything troubled, but inviting him through simple respect. She trusted his presence. Ethan appreciated the careful way she phrased it. He didn't want to intrude, but he felt they didn't mind him being near. He nodded. "My path can lead that way." She gave a small, grateful nod, then returned to help her siblings. When everything was ready, Talon lifted 2 woven bags over his shoulders, and the sisters picked up the smaller bundles. The seller waved goodbye with his usual flair, promising to keep their spot ready the next day if they chose to return. The siblings began walking, and Ethan followed a few steps behind, not too close, not too far. The afternoon light made the desert glow orange and gold, and long shadows stretched across the dusty trail as they headed toward the quieter part of town. After a few minutes of silent walking, Talon slowed his pace so he could speak. "You do not have to come with us," he said, not unkindly. Ethan replied softly, "I'm not comin' to interfere. Just walkin'." Talon studied him briefly, then nodded. "You have a calm spirit. It is good to walk with someone like that." The younger sister walked on Ethan's left side, a few steps ahead. She didn't speak, but occasionally, she looked back at him with a quiet expression. Thoughtful, not wary. She held her bundle carefully, as if it contained something meaningful. The older sister walked beside Talon, talking with him in soft tones. Ethan could only hear pieces of their conversation. Words like meeting, agreement, and tradition. They soon reached the north side of Red Mesa, where the houses were fewer and the land opened up into a wide stretch of tall grass. The place felt peaceful, almost sacred. A single large tree stood near the edge of the open field, its branches wide and welcoming. The siblings walked toward the tree with measured steps. Ethan stayed a polite distance behind, unsure if he should continue forward. But as the siblings reached the tree, the older sister turned back and motioned gently for him to come closer. So he did. Under the shade of the tree sat an elderly Apache woman, her hair long and silver, braided neatly. Her eyes held deep wisdom, and she smiled softly when she saw the siblings approach. She stood up slowly, leaning on a carved walking stick. "Talon," she greeted warmly. "You have arrived." Talon bowed his head slightly. "Grandmother." The sisters also greeted her with quiet respect. Ethan realized instantly that this woman held importance maybe in their community, maybe just in their family, but certainly in their hearts. The warmth they showed her was sincere. The grandmother noticed Ethan then. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "And who is this quiet one, who walks with gentle steps?" Talon smiled faintly. "He is Ethan. He helped us earlier, without being asked." The grandmother gave Ethan a long, thoughtful look, then nodded. "A man who helps without recognition is rare." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he simply dipped his head respectfully. The siblings sat with their grandmother under the tree, opening the bundles they had carried. Inside were small, woven items, charms, and pieces of cloth with symbols embroidered on them. They placed the items in a circle on the grass, arranging them carefully. The grandmother explained softly, "These are gifts of our family. We give them to someone in town today, as a sign of thanks for something done long ago." Ethan listened quietly, feeling the gentle weight of the moment. The siblings weren't here for business, they were here for tradition, for something meaningful to their heritage. He wasn't sure why he had been invited to witness this, but he felt honored. As the soft breeze moved through the tall grass, carrying the scent of desert flowers, Ethan sensed that he had stepped into something larger than himself. And though he didn't fully understand the purpose of the meeting yet, he knew this day was weaving him deeper into the path of the siblings. Not by force, not by accident, but by quiet, steady connection. The gentle shade of the old tree made the air cooler, and the soft rustling of leaves above created a peaceful atmosphere. Ethan stood quietly, not wanting to disturb the family's moment. He felt like a guest who had been allowed into a private space, and he treated it with respect. The siblings and their grandmother sat in a small circle as they spread out the woven items on the grass. The grandmother touched one of the charms lovingly. "These patterns were taught to our family many generations ago," she said. "Every symbol reminds us of something important." The older sister nodded. "We continued the tradition, grandmother. Everything we brought today was made with care." The younger sister placed a sun-shaped charm in the center of the circle. Ethan recognized the pattern. It was similar to the one she had given him earlier. He felt the small charm inside his pocket and gently pressed his hand against it. The grandmother noticed his small movement and smiled softly. "The sun pattern is a symbol of guidance," she said. "It is given to someone who brings calm light into a moment." Ethan didn't know if she meant him specifically, but he felt the warmth of her words anyway. Talon opened the last bag and carefully took out a folded piece of cloth embroidered with bright colors. The grandmother touched it gently. "This is the gift that will be given today," she said. "It carries a story." The siblings sat a little straighter. Clearly, the moment was meaningful to them. Ethan didn't sit down, but he stepped closer so he could hear better. His steps were slow and respectful, his boots barely disturbing the grass. The grandmother looked at him again, studying him with calm eyes that seemed to understand more than she revealed. "You may listen," she said gently. "No harm in sharing a story." Ethan nodded with gratitude. The grandmother began speaking in a clear but gentle voice. "Many years ago, someone in this town helped our family during a difficult time. This person showed kindness, without expecting anything in return, and our family never forgot." The younger sister added quietly, "We were told to bring a gift of thanks when we returned." The grandmother continued, "The person who helped is older now, but kindness does not age. It stays bright, even when years pass." Ethan listened closely. He wondered who in Red Mesa the siblings were searching for. He didn't know many people in town, but he felt curious. The grandmother then closed her eyes for a moment, as if remembering something from long ago. When she opened them again, she looked peaceful. "We will visit that person today," she said, "and we will offer this cloth as a symbol of gratitude." The siblings nodded respectfully. For a moment, no one spoke. A quiet breeze passed through the grass, and the sunlight flickered gently through the branches, making patterns on the ground. Ethan felt the softness of the moment and stayed still so he wouldn't disturb it. After a few minutes, the grandmother began folding the embroidered cloth with great care. Then she placed it into Talon's hands. "You will carry this," she said. Talon accepted it with a small bow of his head. His actions were calm and filled with respect. The older sister stood and stretched slightly. "We should go soon," she said. "The sun will begin to lower." The younger sister also rose, brushing a few blades of grass from her skirt. She looked toward the town, her expression thoughtful but calm. The grandmother used her carved walking stick to stand up. Talon offered his hand in support, but she waved him off gently with a playful smile. "I can stand without turning into a tumbleweed," she said lightly. Her humor made everyone smile. Ethan felt himself relax even more. He appreciated the gentle way this family interacted. Warm, respectful, and full of quiet love. As they prepared to walk back to town, the older sister turned to Ethan. "Would you come with us?" she asked softly. "It is a simple visit, but you have been kind today." Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to intrude on something so personal. "Are you sure?" he asked. Talon nodded. "You walked with us earlier. You may walk again." The grandmother added, "A calm presence is always welcome." Ethan felt humbled. He gave a single nod, agreeing to join them. They began walking together toward the north side of town. The path was quiet, with tall grass brushing gently against their legs. The grandmother walked at a slow pace, so no one rushed. Ethan stayed slightly behind her, ready to offer help if she needed it, but not wanting to assume. As they walked, the younger sister stepped closer to Ethan. She carried a small bundle, and her hands were folded neatly over it. She looked up at him with thoughtful eyes. "You walk very quietly," she said in a soft voice. Ethan wasn't sure if it was meant as a compliment or just an observation. "It's a habit," he replied simply. "It makes the ground feel calm," she said. Ethan was surprised by her words, but he didn't show it on his face. He only nodded. The older sister walked beside Talon, speaking quietly about the location they were heading to. Ethan learned from their conversation that the person they wanted to thank lived in a small home near the edge of the town, someone who preferred quiet over noise. As they continued walking, a soft golden light spread across the town. The afternoon was turning into early evening, and the sun was lowering gently behind the hills. The sky shifted from bright blue to warm shades of orange and pink. The grandmother paused for a moment and looked at the sky. "This hour is special," she said. "The earth feels peaceful." Everyone stood quietly for a moment, taking in the calm scenery. Even Ethan, who usually didn't pause to admire sunsets, felt a sense of comfort in the slow fading of the day. When they reached the edge of town again, they passed by the small houses where families lived. Children were outside, playing simple games, laughing and running with energy. A few adults sat on their porches, enjoying the cooler air. People greeted the siblings and their grandmother with warm nods. It seemed the family was respected here, and the townspeople welcomed them naturally. Ethan noticed some curious glances directed at him. He was a newcomer after all. But no one stared for long. After walking several more minutes, Talon pointed ahead. "There," he said softly. A small house stood at the end of the path. It was simple but tidy, with a small garden of herbs growing outside. A wooden bench sat near the entrance, and a wind chime made of shells hung by the door, making soft music when the breeze passed. The grandmother nodded. "Yes," she said. "This is the place." The siblings stood a little straighter, preparing themselves. The grandmother looked at Ethan and said, "You may wait here if you prefer, or you may stand nearby. The welcome, 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 welcome." Ethan chose to stand a respectful distance away, close enough to show support, far enough to give them privacy. Talon approached the door and knocked gently. A moment later, an elderly man opened it. He had kind eyes and a warm smile. When he saw the grandmother, his face lit up with recognition. "Ah," he said softly. "It has been a long time." The grandmother returned his smile. "Too long," she said. "We came with gratitude." The man stepped aside and welcomed them in. Ethan stayed outside with the evening breeze brushing against him. He didn't mind waiting. He felt honored they trusted him to stand nearby. He didn't know what the siblings would say inside. He didn't know the full story behind the gratitude they carried. But he knew one thing for certain. Whatever connected this family to the town, it was built on kindness. And Ethan's quiet steps had somehow led him right into the middle of it. The evening air was cool and soft as Ethan stood outside the small house, waiting quietly. The sky above him slowly shifted into deeper shades of orange, pink, and soft purple. It was the kind of sky that made a person stop and take a long breath, simply to feel the beauty of the moment. Ethan felt peaceful standing there, even though he didn't fully understand the family's purpose. Something inside him told him this visit mattered more than anything that had happened earlier that day. He could hear gentle voices inside the house, but not the words. He didn't try to listen closely, this was their private moment. Instead, he focused on the surroundings. The wind chime by the door made soft music whenever a breeze passed, and the small herb garden gave off a faint but pleasant smell. It was the kind of home that felt warm even before stepping inside. After several minutes, the door opened again. Talon was the first to step outside. His expression was calm, but also touched with quiet emotion. The older sister followed him, carrying one of the empty woven bags. The younger sister walked behind her, holding the folded, embroidered cloth. It was no longer wrapped as a gift, it was simply folded with care, almost like a memory they wanted to keep close. Last to exit was the grandmother, walking slowly with her carved stick. The elderly man from the house walked with her, smiling gently as he escorted her to the porch. "Thank you for coming," the man said, his voice low but warm. The grandmother placed her hand over her heart. "Your kindness from long ago returned to us again today," she said softly. "We are grateful." "We." The man shook his head lightly. "Kindness is not something that belongs to one moment," he said. "It continues, just like the river continues to flow." The two shared a long look filled with quiet understanding. The siblings bowed their heads respectfully before stepping back. The grandmother offered one last smile, then gently turned to join her family. The man waved goodbye as he slowly closed the door. Ethan, still holding his hat respectfully in his hand, stepped a little closer as the family walked toward him. The grandmother's eyes found him first. "Thank you for waiting," she said. Ethan nodded. "Didn't mind." The younger sister stepped forward slightly. She carried the folded, embroidered cloth in both hands, and her eyes were gentle. "Our visit went well," she said. Grandmother shared our thanks. It meant a lot. Ethan could see the calm on their faces. Whatever they had needed to do, they had done it with respect and sincerity. Talon took a deep breath, as if releasing a long-held feeling. "The man helped our family many years ago," he explained quietly. "Today, we returned the respect he showed." Ethan listened carefully as Talon continued. "He once gave our grandmother shelter during a storm," Talon said. "He helped her find her way when she was far from home. She never forgot. She told us, when the time is right, we must return to him with a gift of thanks." the older sister added. Today was the right time. Ethan felt a warm respect rise within him. It was rare, he thought, to see people honor kindness from so long ago. Many people forgot good deeds quickly, but this family had carried gratitude for years. The grandmother stepped closer to Ethan. Her voice was soft, but her words were full of meaning. You walked with us today without asking anything. You brought silent calm. She lifted her hand and lightly touched the charm in his pocket with the tips of her fingers. And you accepted a gift with humility. Ethan didn't speak. He simply nodded, unsure what words could match the depth of her kindness. The grandmother smiled. Quiet people often carry strong hearts. The younger sister looked at Ethan, her expression thoughtful. You helped us twice today without knowing it, she said. First at the booth, then during the visit. When someone walks with peace, the air around them also becomes peaceful. Ethan wasn't used to praise. His chest felt a little tight, not in a painful way, but in a way that made him swallow gently before speaking. Just did what felt right, he said softly. The older sister gave him a kind smile. Doing what feels right is more rare than people think. They began walking back toward the center of town. This time, Ethan walked beside them, not behind. The grandmother walked in the middle, and Ethan instinctively stayed close enough to offer support if she needed it. Even though she walked with steady steps, the siblings seemed lighter now, as if a small weight had lifted off their shoulders. The young sister walked near Ethan, her steps quiet and graceful. Every so often, she glanced at him, not with curiosity, but with quiet appreciation. As they reached the main path near town, Talon spoke. We will return to the booth tomorrow, he said. The seller has kept our place open. Ethan nodded. Your crafts will bring more people. They bring stories, the older sister said. Stories find the people who are meant to hear them. They walked slower now, enjoying the cool air of the early evening. The golden light of the sunset made their shadows long and soft against the ground. After a while, the grandmother stopped, leaning slightly on her stick. This is where we part for today, she said. Our home is not far from here. The siblings nodded. The grandmother looked at Ethan once more. Thank you for your steps, she said. Your day became part of our day, in a gentle way. Ethan placed his hat over his chest respectfully. Thank you for letting me walk with you. The younger sister stepped forward. She held the embroidered cloth close, keeping it safe. Then, she reached into her small bundle and pulled out a tiny woven charm shaped like a leaf. It is for new paths, she said softly. So your steps always find peaceful ground. Sensno. Ethan accepted it slowly. Thank you, he said, his voice lower than usual. The charm felt warm in his hand, as if it had been made with quiet intention. Talon placed a hand briefly on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan didn't know what the next day would bring, but he nodded once. The siblings and their grandmother walked toward their home, their figures slowly blending into the soft colors of the evening. Ethan stood there for a moment, holding the leaf-shaped charm and listening to the distant sound of the wind chime behind him. He felt something unusual, something gentle, something grounding. A day that had started with simple curiosity had turned into a day of meaning, connection, and quiet gratitude. As he walked back toward his lodging, he touched the two small charms in his pocket, the sun and the leaf. They felt light, yet somehow important. Ethan had always been a quiet man who stayed on the move, never staying in one place for too long. But that evening, as the sky turned into deep shades of night, he found himself thinking that maybe Red Mesa was a place worth staying in just a bit longer. Not because of the marketplace, not because of the peaceful scenery, but because of a family who had shown him something rare: kindness given without question, respect shared without effort, and a path he hadn't expected to walk, yet had walked anyway, calmly, quietly, and fully welcomed.